Hello, welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports and another edition of What is in Our Stand Today. And that's a hashtag you can follow, hashtag What is in Our Stand Today. That's a hashtag I use across all my social media, so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course here on YouTube. So thank you for watching. What we have is a Rotor InPower Crankset that when I would torque it to the spec, which is between 35 to 40 Newton meters, it would bind, in my opinion, bind. I would spin the crankset and it would only turn about 3-4 times. And I know that, like, let's say a Shimano threaded in bottom bracket, when you spin a crankset, it doesn't spin like you sometimes see on these ceramic bearing videos where the thing just spinning like mad. But what I'm saying is it was barely spinning. So I took the crankset apart, checked the bottom bracket bearings, and they're fine. They're beautiful, they're smooth, they're quiet, they're nice. So then I started messing around with, okay, a little less torque just to see where it started to bind. And as I mentioned before, it's 35 to 40 Newton meters. Right around 24 Newton meters, it started to bind and it was no longer free spinning. So I said, well, and by the way, it's the first time I'm working on this bike, so I have no other history. I don't know who built the bike. I don't know any of that. And it's irrelevant. But I then said, okay, well, let's start playing around with removing this spacer, that spacer. We want to keep the same drive line, and let's just see. So if you're not familiar with the way a rotor crankset is made, you have the drive side here, which I'll show you in a second. But you have spacers on the drive side and non-drive side, and they have this collar here where, if you know, once you get it up to torque, if you have a little bit of play in the system or you want to preload the bearings a little bit, you'd screw this down. Okay, well, this was screwed all the way against the crank arm, and in my opinion it was not even being used. So I then looked through all my spare spacers, and I found something that I think is going to work. So the spacer that came out of it was a 2.4 spacer, and what we're going to do is replace it with like a 0.7 or so, 0.8. okay, so much smaller, but there's plenty of adjustment here on this collar. Okay, so that's what we're going to do now, is put this back together. It's a little messy, I know, but hey, that's what bike shops look like. And generally, you don't see any of that because the service bays are usually away from where the consumers are. What we'll do now is put the spacers on that were there before, and we'll put a little bit of grease on this spindle. Of course, once we put this back together, we will inspect to make sure. And I'll bring up the torque slowly, because the important thing is that you're trying to get the correct torque, and you're trying to keep the crankset from obviously falling off the bike. All right. That guy on there, and then this spacer. I'm sorry if I'm blocking your view, sir. I think I've said this before in other videos. You could play a good trick on one of your friends by putting these cranksets other than 180 degrees out. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to torque this to about 28 just to see how it spins. And actually, all right, so there you go. Now you get a representation of how well the crankset spins before it's up to torque. All right, so let's just see. All right, so there's 28. Wonderful, right? So let's go up to 32 and see how that goes. All right. Still spinning wonderful and free. We're going to go to 36. It's all about being in the right position. All right, 36 is fine. And the torque value is 35 to 40. So now we're going to go to 40. All right, there's 40. Still spinning. Look how free that spins. All right, but now we're going to have some lateral play, right? So see if you can focus inside here, sir. Right? Or even the chain ring inside this front derailleur. So maybe shoot from up here, maybe. So it should be fairly noticeable, right? Okay, so now we'll tighten down the collar a little bit. Play is starting to go away. Less and less. There, the play is gone. And now we have a free spinning crankset. And there's no more play in that. So I think that's good to go. Walk that way just a little bit, sir. And what we'll do now is this right here. What is this? Yeah, it's a 2 millimeter. So now we're just going to lock it in place so that the crankset does not have any, so this doesn't unthread and go back towards the crank arm. Look at that. We just gave this rider probably another, yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, that's all for today, but the lesson learned here is somehow the wrong spacers or too many spacers or whatever was installed, and this crankset was barely spinning before, and now it spins very freely. So anyway, that's all for today. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you up the road.